Social media is a wonderful tool that can be used to keep in touch with friends and loved ones and provide a platform for self-expression. However, it can also be used to expose the vulnerable to exploitation, cause anxiety sometimes, and facilitate the spread of disinformation. For most people, sharing the content they receive online is simply a click away, without any thought or impact of what that sharing might do to a grieving family, for example. Let's speak now on the sensitivities, but also importantly, the legal ramifications of sharing such content online. And we speak now to CEO of Digitally Legal, that's Advocate Zanyiwe Ntatisi Asare, who speaks to us all the way from Zambia, Lusaka. Advocate, thank you very much for your time. The reason we have invited you here is on the back of the tragic incident that occurred late on Friday night. Well-known musician, a.k.a., or his real name, Kenan Forbes, shot execution style alongside his friend, Tibello Motswane. People were quick to get a hold of that CCTV footage and started sharing it online. As traumatizing as it was, people have not stopped sharing that kind of content. Let's start first with the legal implications of sharing such images.
I think before we start, I definitely want to say my sincerest condolences to both the families. It is quite tragic what happened. Now, to jump into the legalities, if we look at that video, that gruesome video, that in itself is admissible evidence, and that was a crime scene. If we look at the South African law, the Criminal Procedure Act would be applicable here, and also the Police Act. That would effectively say anybody that is disseminating, sharing, doing anything with admissible evidence is, in contravention of the law. In a nutshell, what you're doing is you are getting in between the process that we have in South Africa. The first one would speak about the potential suspects around the case, so the people who would be around there, public opinion on who they think did what. That in itself is unlawful. We all know that in South Africa you are innocent before proven guilty, and we all have, the right to a fair trial. So that in itself creates a really, a lot of blurred lines when it comes to that evidence being admissible and being used appropriately.
Yeah. Advocate, let's look at law enforcement. Part of the reason, perhaps, that people find it so easy to share such images. I mean, this is a case that is still going to be investigated by the police. And so that could thwart the processes, those processes of investigations that are still going to be embarked upon. Do you think that the lack of arrests by law enforcement of people who are doing this is part of the problem that perpetuates this kind of behavior?
I think that's an excellent question. I think we're still very immature in the way that we use social media globally. I don't want to just zone into South Africa. So, for instance, if we look at the dissemination of images online, for a living being, a natural juristic person, we'd have the Data Protection Act or the Cybersecurity Act that is very explicit in the protection that the individual has, the data subject. Now, what happens is when one is deceased, those rights fall away because it's for a natural living being. And that creates quite a contentious situation because you can't, the deceased can't really apply and invoke those rights. However, when it comes to, like you said, enforcement of even, the rights that a living being has, it is quite difficult for people to know what to apply because our level of literacy, first of all, whether it's in schools, whether it's in organizations, places of work, governments themselves, is really not at the standard we should be having. A lot of sensitive information, whether it's, crime scenes such as the one we're discussing today, or sensitive information around, whether it's state secrets, state security, individuals' financial status, health status, very sensitive and personal information, we I apologize for that. We don't have, enough literacy and awareness around that. So we definitely need to look at investing in that, because there's no point in writing laws if they're not enforceable and people don't know about them.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember a time in South Africa during the COVID outbreak, there were very clear rules around disseminating false information. I mean, there are even cases that I presume are still ongoing about disseminating that kind of information. And I can think back to even the July unrest, where some people were actually rounded up for encouraging that kind of thing, where we were told that these were the people that encouraged the torching of trucks and what have you. But when it comes to, I think, privacy and personal space, people simply don't have. They seem to act as if there are no rules. Perhaps let's talk about the recourse that the families, the grieving families, might have against at least one person that they might target to say, why did you choose to do this? Do you think that that particular case could be winnable in court?
So right now our laws don't specifically give, I can't guide you to a particular law that says this cannot be shared on social media. However, we can definitely look into, civil based, requests on behalf of the family that say, look, this is quite traumatizing. What you're doing doesn't make sense. What happened last year is that the president signed in the Films or Publications Amendment Act, which effectively governs the type of information or the dissemination of, whether it's images, any type of file that someone sees online. What this does then is it protects people from having these images shared despite, it being of the deceased. So it really governs any type of a publication that happens within the South African ecosystem. So any platform that's in South Africa. Another layer that comes in there is looking at what the Cybersecurity Act has done in South Africa. Now you can actually request these platforms to say, give us the IP address, go to the police, of course, and the police would get the IP address and assist in locating these people, and then we could bring on legal action. So people need to understand that people have not really invested in doing so, but the mechanisms are definitely there. And if the family does go and, put their weight behind trying to find someone and creating an example, there could be serious implications. And I think we're waiting to see that as South Africa, to have precedent to show that these laws are real. But outside of the laws being real, there are serious implications. I mean, if we had to now combine the Police Act, the Criminal Procedure Act, and the Films and Publications Act, you could find yourself, having yourself in jail and arrested for about 12 months and having a fine. I don't believe anybody wants that. And I do believe there needs to be more literacy and awareness to ensure that, one, the people that are disseminating, quite similar to the misinformation and disinformation during COVID time, understand that they are performing something that could get them in serious trouble. And I look forward to South Africa taking that on and seeing the legal system really work in that regard, because what is happening is inhumane. It's actually shameful that as a society we find it okay to send that kind of content. I think it also speaks to a bigger societal rot that we certainly need to deal with as a country.
Yeah. Advocate, as I let you go, just your overall message to South Africans and perhaps anyone else who cares to listen when tragic incidents like these happen. Just bear in mind that this could be your loved one, and you may not want to find out about their passing via social media, particularly if the incident occurred publicly. I know that sometimes the argument will be, no, but this is a famous person. It's as if the rules are suspended when it is a famous face that has had such a tragedy occur to them. What would the overall message be to social media users about the responsible use of online platforms?
That's a difficult one. But I think, just speaking from my heart, it would be that we're all human first. We're the person is famous or, has a story. We're all human first. And I think, as you rightfully said, what would you want someone to do? I think, in our generation of society, we never see ourselves in others. And you need to try and embrace and be empathetic with other people's pain, because unfortunately in this life, the wheel definitely turns around and you don't want to be the person wanting, because you put out that energy.
Yeah.
So I think simple messages, we're all people first, and let's take care of each other the way you would like to be taken care of.
CEO of Digitally Legal, Advocate Zanyiwe Ntatisi Asare. Thank you very much for your time. And just as we were